whether or not, an institution wants to white label our entire mobile application to resemble what we have in the US, we could easily deliver that. But when we go to the other extreme, we've taken that mobile application, we've compartmentalized each and every one of those components, turned those into SDKs, APIs behind that, so that then large institutions that already have mobile applications, already have those mobile applications that have been downloaded by their consumers, we're able to come in and enrich those mobile applications with the Moven experience without the need for a full rebuild.
Welcome to the Tearsheet podcast. I'm Zack Miller. Moven was founded in 2011 by Brett King. It was really early in the move to standalone digital banks, which we like to call challenger banks here on the podcast. Without branches and transacting via telephone, the company was an early pioneer. Fast forward to 2019, and Moven is now led by Marek Forysiak and has added a new part of its business, banking as a service. Moven Enterprise powers digital banking functionality for traditional financial institutions around the world, like TD Bank and Westpac. CEO Marek Forysiak joins us on the podcast today to talk about Moven's evolution as a digital bank and how its customers, both retail and now increasingly enterprise, have changed over time. We talk about Moven's customer acquisition strategy and what the firm is cooking up for the future. Marek Forysiak is my guest today on the Tearsheet podcast.
Thanks, Zach. Well, my name is Marek Forysiak. I am the CEO at Moven Corp. And as kind of the title implies, as a chief executive officer, my real responsibility is to, guide and oversee, the organization, which today operates, its U.S. direct-to-consumer business, Moven Bank, as commonly known as. But we've also, really since 2016, have expanded globally. So overseeing, our global enterprise business as well.
So I want to hear about both those sides. We had a CEO on the show recently, and he said his job as CEO was to make sure the garbage got taken out. I hadn't heard that one before, but I thought that was good. So can we talk about the genesis story of Moven? Can we start there, and then I guess sort of the trajectory and sort of the evolution of how that moved into how you guys chose to move into enterprise? I think that'd be interesting for us. Okay.
Right. So using the word genesis, right, Zach? So the genesis of Moven, and again, I'm sure you're familiar with Brett King.
Mm-hmm.
Brett King is the founder of Moven. And when you think about Moven Bank and the genesis behind that, it's the combination of two words with "and" in between, right? So it's move and bank. So when we thought about putting together, a financial institution, and we looked at the way digital is going to reshape the way financial services are delivered, how mobile is going to become embedded in everyone's life. The thesis there was, banking everywhere except at a bank. So Moven Bank is really the nexus behind what it is we wanted to bring to the market, and what we launched back 2011, 2012 as one of the pioneers, in the neo-banking challenger bank space here in the U.S. And that was fundamentally underpinned, Zach, by thinking that a bank account, just like your phone, just like your television, just like your watch, a bank account should also be smart. And how do we think about making a bank account smart? By putting technology into the hands of consumers, technology that will ultimately allow for customers to gain or to achieve better control on how and where their money is spent, so that they could improve and see that their own financial wellness and financial well-being improve over time. That's kind of the genesis, and ultimately what it is Moven has been working towards, since the onset. Again, we launched in the U.S. as a direct-to-consumer business, and as we started going down that path, and as we began to build our customers, What we found was that there are a lot of other institutions that wanted to leverage the same patented technology that Moven brings to bear. And again, brings to bear in a manner that allows for customers to have better insights on where they spend, insights that allow for them to control their spending habits, controlling spending habits that allow for them to increase and improve their savings behaviors. So 2016 comes along, TD says, we really, really like what you guys are doing. Not really interested in your US direct-to-consumer business, but what about white labeling your technology? White labeling your technology so that we can make it available to our millions of customers so they could benefit from the same technology that you're delivering to customers in the US on a direct-to-consumer basis. And that kind of launched us into the enterprise business, and making our platform available as a service to TD as our flagship enterprise client that we have then subsequently, over the past several years, have built on to now include Westpac, BCA or Bank Central Asia in Indonesia, Yandex Money in Russia. So we really become a global brand on how we deliver the same wellness-related solution to now millions of customers, not just that are Moven customers in the US, but customers of other financial institutions that are leveraging our same technology.
So I want to come back to the enterprise business in a second, but since you guys were so early and we're real pioneers in the direct-to-consumer space, how has the end consumer changed, I guess, over that time? I know that's a broad question, but I guess when you were first marketing, I mean, it was the first time they really had access to some of these tools. And I think as more banks have launched and as incumbents have improved their digital properties, I have to assume that the consumers have changed as well. Have you seen, or can you describe, I guess, how the evolution on the consumer side, what they're asking for and how they interface with you guys?
Yeah, the big change, Zach, now is where, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we were novelties out there in so much as we were providing customers convenience in how they made payments, how they transferred money, whether that transfer, was, on a person-to-person basis. But what you didn't really see back in 2011, 2012, remember we were out in the space with Simple, if you remember back then. What we weren't able to do, and where the breakthrough didn't happen, was become the primary banking relationship for a customer. So again, the focus there was so much on convenience, digital enablement, real-time insights, all of which are incredibly valuable. But when you think about a primary bank relationship, it includes things like savings, it includes things like credit. So when you look today in the marketplace, and you compare where neobanks or challenger banks, however you want to define them, Zach, when you look at what they are today versus what they looked like 2011, 2012, the challenger banks today are fully enabled, banking institutions with the bundling of all of the products and services that banks typically offer to consumers. Yet they're doing that with all of the conveniences that come from mobile and digital enablement. That's the big change that's taken place, in this last 5, 6, 7 years.
And I'm curious, I guess also how your own technology stack has evolved during this time, because, at least from our perspective, we've seen, a ton of new sort of B2B, just as you guys have gone B2B, there are other services out there. Have you guys moved more from a build it to a partner model, I guess, on building your own technology stack?
We still develop our own technology. Okay. So we have our own in-house engineers. We believe that differentiates Moven in a very significant way. In particular, when we think about the way that our technology, gets adapted to all the varying circumstances that are out there, around the world. So when we looked at TD in Canada, and even TD now, as we work for launching what is TD My Spend in America, what we did in Canada 3 or 4 years ago, very different from the requirements now even in the US. But take that out to Indonesia, where BCA, which is third or fourth largest retail bank in a country same size as the United States, but obviously where those consumers are on a development continuum is very, very different. To then looking at places like Russia, to New Zealand, hard to imagine having an organization that can deliver solutions that address those markets without some significant effort on localizing those solutions.
Yeah, that localization was going to be one of my further questions. But so let's focus on the enterprise now. It sounds like it was somewhat fortuitous with TD to start. That they had a solution. You guys were there. What does the sales cycle typically look like? Dealing, we've heard from a lot of people in your seat. It's obviously long and extended. Are there specific things that they're looking for from Moven that you guys have sort of become, sort of capable with in terms of pre-addressing these questions or their concerns?
Yeah, of course. And again, a lot of that has to do with how we evolved as well, Zach, right? We didn't get into this business deliberately on building, an enterprise software as a service organization. We started as a U.S. direct-to-consumer business, and the technology was largely purpose-built, for the U.S. marketplace and for our own purposes.
And that really created a brand and awareness, right? I mean, that obviously worked to your advantage, right?
Yeah. So over the past several years, we've invested heavily into the technology so that we could address the various delivery models that are out there. So that now means, whether or not, an institution wants to white label our entire mobile application to resemble what we have in the US, we can easily deliver that. But when we go to the other extreme, we've taken that mobile application, we've compartmentalized each and every one of those components, turned those into SDKs, APIs behind that, so that then large institutions that already have mobile applications, already have those mobile applications that have been downloaded by their consumers, we're able to come in and enrich those mobile applications with the Moven experience without the need for a full rebuild. That's allowed for us to come in a much more nimble manner, much more cost effective, and much less disruptive. So that's allowed for us to be able to really drive this, partnership with financial institutions, because we're not looking to come in, replace your mobile technology. We're not looking to come in and say, abandon what you have, developed in-house in whichever manner and take ours, which, is the best thing since sliced bread. We take a totally different approach. One is absolutely complementary, and one in a partnership mode where we say, let's take what you have. Let's go from version 1.0 to 2.0, 2.0 to 3.0. Let's enrich the services that you make available to your customers. Let's provide real-time insights. Let's allow for personalization, all within the existing framework and infrastructure that these banks are operating with today.
That's a great approach. So when you went international, you talked about sort of the heavy lift in localizing your technology. I guess, can you give us a little bit of description about what that entails? Obviously, there's a language component. Are you doing custom builds as well, like for specific requirements in different countries?
We do. Again, depending on the nature of the client, we try to keep to one primary thesis is in and around, the principles of our application is one whereby we look at real-time insights, real-time insights that get surfaced to clients, so that then clients could make real-time decisions based on information being surfaced to them at that right point. So we use words like contextualizing credit, contextualizing savings. And contextualize means bringing it into the moment. So all of our partners, as long as they fundamentally agree with that premise, we'll do whatever other localization or customizing they look for. But we won't go away from things like real time. We won't go away from things like aggregation, all of which are fundamental for consumers to be able to gain better control of their spending. Better control of their spending leads to better savings habits. Better savings habits lead to improving your own financial well-being. That's what we stand for. And again, we take a fairly rigid approach in discussing with our clients to make sure that we're on that same page. That we take an approach where we do no harm. We're here to improve the lives of consumers. Financial institutions are so uniquely positioned to do that. And we want to make our technology available in its utmost for those institutions to be able to deliver that to their customers.
And what does cycle times look like on the enterprise side? Well, let me ask it differently. Given the fact that you had built up all your DTC capabilities, evolving into a B2B company requires, a sales force, or I guess how did the company evolve along those lines internally to be able to service enterprise customers?
Well, Zach, that comes with raising capital, right? Mm-hmm. So, we've raised capital and we've continuously raised capital. Our Series C round, which was done now about 18 months ago, that was with SBI out of Japan, SBI Holdings. And again, that provided us really the much needed capital to mature our global distribution business around enterprise. We recruited Chief Revenue Officer for Global Enterprise, a gentleman named Kesh Tawar. We recruited Chief Platform Officer. So again, we really matured our enterprise business. The maturing of that business came with raising additional capital. We raised the additional capital, and now we cover most parts of the globe, either with our own sales force in place, whether that's in Asia, Europe, Latin America, and then where we don't have full-time salespeople on the ground, Zach, what we have are value-added resellers. Mm-hmm. In other markets where we want to expand, but we just really don't have critical mass or the market momentum yet. North Africa is a classic example of that. We work with a value-added reseller like Inlax that allows for us to have that reach. We fully empower them with all the capabilities and information needed for them to be able to have meaningful discussions with banking institutions. But again, once we get the critical mass in those marketplaces, then we'll staff into those regions accordingly.
That makes a lot of sense. And as you were going out and pitching new enterprise customers, do you bump into other suppliers, or are you up more against just internal resources? Like, how competitive is that market? Do you see?
Competition is out there. Mm-hmm. There are competitors out there like Tink, Menenga, Backbase, that are all involved actively in delivering personalization and digital personalization within mobile solutions to banks around the world. So the fact that there are more and more institutions like Moven, to me, suggests that we're kind of crossing that tipping point where you're really going to see tremendous movements forward with a lot of financial institutions, banking in particular, that absolutely now are running out of time to make these changes. And if you think about that, from a macro perspective in financial services, the last 10 years, a lot of the benefits that banks were generating came from a falling interest rate environment. That game's pretty much over. And again, the next 10 years, the next decade is really going to be a decade of efficiency, implementing technologies. And that's where that's where organizations like Moven and our competitors, because there's more of them coming up, there's more of them entering into the space because the demand is going to become exponentially greater in the next 3, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so how do you position Moven in a more competitive marketplace? How do you differentiate from some of the competition out there?
Well, again, our differentiation absolutely comes from the clients that we have, the results that we're able to deliver. So when we look at TD alone, TD MySpend in Canada with over 2 million TD MySpend users, again, that's Moven driving that for TD. We see that the tangible results that TD is generating from that partnership with Moven is tremendous. Their savings rates in the TD MySpend cohort is up 5.5% to 6% per annum versus the non-TD MySpend cohort. The attrition rate, 1/5 TD MySpend versus non-TD MySpend. Those are the results that at the end of the day will allow us to differentiate in the marketplace. Because it's not about what it is that we talk about doing, we actually deliver on what promises we make to our clients.
Got it. And I guess in the remaining time, we have time for one last question. I guess as you're looking forward, you talked about a capital raise before. You talked about expanding enterprise, as continuing to run DTC. You've got a lot on your plate. Like, where's your focus in the near term to midterm?
Yeah, I mean, our nearest term focus is in and around what is going to be Moven 4.0. So as you know, Brett's most recent book, Banking 4.0, was released earlier this year, and in sync, we are launching Moven 4.0, and that's going to be our newest release. And again, much more embedded AI. So again, when we think about advice as a service, Moven 4.0 is going to be underpinned by providing advice as a service, and advice that not only addresses savings but also credit, and all of the various machine learning aspects around not just advice relative to savings, but also advice relative to credit.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Tearsheet Podcast today.
Thanks, Zach. Have a great day.